Hey folks, David Stewart here. Here's a little photo that I took. I snapped at Target the other day when I was with my family, and I wish I'd taken a much bigger photo of the entire wall of Star Wars toys because that would get more to my point. But I did take a picture of this one particular toy for reasons I'll get to at the end of the video. The wall was full of Rose Tico toys. In fact, I'd say the majority of the wall, like 80-90%, was Rose Tico, Leia Organa, and Rey toys. There was there were no Kylo Rens, there were no Luke Skywalker action figures whatsoever. There was a couple of Poes and a couple of Finns, but likewise they were mostly missing. But you had row after row of these Rose Ticos. Now I don't have the photo to show you. You just kind of have to take my word for it. That's what I saw. Got me thinking with this. Tweeted this out. Why are nobody buying these toys? It's a mystery to me, kind of sarcastically, because it's really not a mystery to me. However, I think it's remains a mystery to mainstream media outlets, or they're unwilling to say what they know is true in their heart. So I'm going to link a couple of articles by, say, Forbes and Fortune, trying to explain why retail orders for Star Wars toys were down 47% at the end of 2017 versus 2016, almost a 50% drop, almost half as many ordered as the previous year. You go to a Toys R Us, you go to a Target, you'll probably know why, which is they're not selling. You look around, there's still Force Awakens toys sitting on the shelf on clearance. They've been on clearance for more than a year. People still don't buy them on clearance. A $200, Walker toy, they're like, well, we found it at Ross for like $90, and it's like, who's spending $200 on a toy for their kid? And that's really what we know, what I believe the case to be, and it's the simplest answer, which is that you're making toys that people don't want to buy. And it's like, well, of course, aren't you just kind of making a circular argument there? Well, the demographic that buys Star Wars toys is not interested in the Star Wars toys you're providing for them. Parents are not buying $200 Walker toys for their kids, or they're a very small percentage of parents. They want a couple of $10, $15 toys to buy them. And they probably are buying them some $10 or $15 toys, but they're not buying them Rose Ticos because boys are not interested in Resistance Tech Rose, and they're not very interested in General Leia Organa. They're interested in Kylo Ren, Luke Skywalker. They're interested in their male heroes. So if you look at the market that actually buys them, you're making toys that the market doesn't want to buy. That is probably the simplest and most obvious explanation. And as a retailer, if I'm not selling the toys, I'm not going to buy anymore. But they come up with lots of reasons, which are probably also valid, but to a lesser degree. Like there's fatigue from the movies, fatigue from buying the toys. The collectors aren't wanting to buy all the toys. Collectors have always been a very small part of a toy market. Although there's been a lot of Star Wars collectors, and George Lucas to a certain extent has milked them, and Disney has milked them. They're not the majority of the toy buying public. That remains to be kids. And who plays with action figures? Mostly boys, not girls. And mostly boys are going to want, things that appeal to them as far as play, which is going to be, male hero and villain figures, He-Man and Skeletor, if you will. So that's really the most obvious explanation. The question is, why did they make these toys if they should have known that nobody was going to buy them? I think there's three reasons. What I call blind marketing, marketing in reverse, and finally Bolshevik marketing. Blind marketing is where you make a product and then put it out there and hope people buy it and see if people buy it. A lot of things have to be blind marketed if there's nothing that exists that's like it, because it might be super innovative, like a smartphone or some kind of new device. You kind of have to create it and hope that people will see some kind of value in it and buy it, rather than doing market research beforehand and seeing what people want more of and making more of it. And I do take a more holistic view of marketing that includes the research prior to making your product or creating your service, which is doing some research and seeing where there's a lack in the market, or what you can provide more of or better than somebody else. So that's what I call blind marketing. And the other part of this, what I call marketing in reverse, which is you look at a market that doesn't buy a product and then you create a product hoping that they'll buy it. So it's like, and this is where I really think the creation of Rey comes into play as a character. And this is how I probably would have sold her to the board of directors, and possibly how she was sold to the board of directors at Disney, who are more interested in making money than in promoting social issues for now, at least for the most part. That may change, who knows to what degree they balance those parts. But you say, hey, Star Wars is a really male-heavy demographic. We have the boys locked down. They're going to come to the Star Wars movies no matter what. We're going to put a girl lead character. It's not going to keep the boys away because it's still Star Wars, but it's going to get more women to go see Star Wars, more girls to go see and be interested in Star Wars. We're going to create products that are for girls. We're going to create action products for girls. We're going to get them interested in Star Wars, and that's 50% of the market that's untapped. You're marketing in reverse, because rather than looking at what people actually want, you're looking at what they don't want and trying to create a product to make them want it. It'd be like creating Barbies for boys, right? It's like, well, 50% of the market, we could increase our sales. We could double our sales if we could just get all the boys to buy Barbies too. It's like, yeah, but if that's something they're completely uninterested in, then it's not going to work. We'll create a product that will get them kind of tangentially interested in it. And they might have gotten some more girls to buy Star Wars toys. But I think, and this is one of the things that you're not going to see in these mainstream discussions of this, is the demographics of who buys what. But toy companies know this, and they ought to know this because it's their business. The boys tend to buy the action figures to, enact wars with and fight with and do those sorts of things. Girls buy different kinds of toys than boys. We still have boy and girl different toys. A competent marketer doesn't look at the market and say, how can I get women to buy something they're not interested in buying? You look at it like, well, women are interested in this. How can I go create a better product for them or find more products that they're interested in? That's going to be better marketing. That's what's going to end up making you more money. So this is marketing reverse, kind of looking at things backwards from how they should be. Saying, well, there's no product serving this part of the market, so let's create one, even though that there's no action figures for girls because girls don't want them. It's just not something that they're super interested in. And you can call me sexist if you want, but just looking at what is doesn't make me sexist. It just makes me a realist, if you want. So that's the second one. And the third one is what I call Bolshevik marketing. And I do think that this is in play, particularly with this Rose Tico toy. And I'll present one extra little argument at the end here to kind of support that. But Bolshevik marketing is where you create a product that you think people ought to have or they ought to want, rather than something that they do want. So if you imagine a Soviet shoemaker, you have a committee of people making shoes in Soviet Russia, and they make some decisions on what their shoes are going to look like and how it's going to look, what materials are going to be made out there. Like, we're going to make a vulcanized rubber sole, so it's very tough and very durable. We'll make the top out of leather so it's weatherproof and really durable, and we'll make it out of bonded black leather. We'll color them black so they'll go with lots of different clothes. We'll make them lace all the way up, and we'll make them boots so that they can fit a large variety of feet. We'll make the bottom textured so it can grip even in slippery environments. And we'll make the inside out of this durable kind of leather, and so it'll be comfortable to stand in all day. And there's our shoe for the workers. Now, that might actually be a good shoe for a lot of people, right? There's this belief that the Soviets produced nothing of value, and that's not true. But the way that they created products was inevitably didn't serve very many people's needs, because you create this boot, and yeah, it's a good boot for standing around in a factory. But it's not a good boot for running in. It's not a good boot for, maybe hiking in. It might be, maybe you want some rubber boots for like really snowy, rainy days. Or maybe you just want shoes that make your feet look good, right? Maybe you want shoes that make your suit look good, or whatever it's going to be. Most of you who are watching this have a lot more than one pair of shoes because, they serve different functions. So in the capitalist West, we create a huge variety of shoes to where women have entire closets dedicated to all their shoes that they have for every single possible function that you can imagine. And men have lots of different kinds of shoes too. You have your dress shoes, you got sneakers, you got boots, you got different kinds of things. I have a lot of shoes. And I used to remark how few shoes I had, but compared to somebody in Soviet Russia, I might have a lot of shoes because there's a lot of different functions that I need my shoes to fill. So the Bolshevik idea is you create something that people ought to want. You create music that you think people ought to listen to. So you create characters that you think people ought to want and ought to respect and ought to buy. But you still have the free market, and so people don't have to buy what you want them to buy, and they choose alternatives. While I was in Target, all the boys ran past all these Star Wars toys and ignored them. Went over to Marvel stuff. They went over to DC Comics stuff. They went over to various different kinds of toys, and the store was full of boys and girls, and none of them, the girls weren't looking at Star Wars toys. None of them were. I know this is an anecdote, but maybe it fits your experience of your senses as well. And the boys that were looking at Star Wars toys, none of them were looking at Rose Tico toys. They were all looking at Darth Vader. Even my son, who's never seen the original trilogy, knows who Darth Vader is, walks past the aisle, finds the Darth Vader toy in the Rogue One collection, because there's Rogue One toys still sitting on the shelves that people aren't buying, and says, "Daddy, that's Darth Vader." That's how he says Darth Vader. There's no Kylo Ren's on the shelves, so even though Kylo Ren's a flawed character, people are buying him. People are buying the Luke Skywalkers, those sorts of things. So you look at this, and it's pretty obvious that they made toys for a demographic that's not interested in those toys, or they made toys that they thought the demographic ought to be interested in, and they're not interested in them, and they're not going to buy them. Their parents are going to buy them different things. The kids are going to go to the toy store and ask for a different toy from their parents, and the Star Wars toys right on the shelf. And the main thing is that kind of thinking reduces the value of the franchise. Because although I think Star Wars, I think it's going to make Disney their money back without any problems that they bought from George Lucas, because they'll make it back basically with movies. But the whole value of the franchise is more than the movies. It's the being able to use Star Wars in their theme parks. They're building a Star Wars land in Disneyland. It's being able to market Star Wars toys sold through Hasbro and that sort of deal. But if Hasbro is looking at it and like, we're not selling any of the toys you're telling us to sell, we're not going to keep doing this. Or you're going to have to cut us a better deal and let us decide which toys we're going to make for whomever. So you're reducing the value of this by attempting to do this sort of Bolshevik marketing, attempting to do marketing in reverse. You're reducing the value of the franchise without really thinking far enough in advance on that. By creating toys that you think boys ought to want, and then they don't end up wanting it, you reduce the value of the franchise. And that's a point I want to hammer home. Now, why do I think the Bolshevik thing is very likely? Well, I just look at this Rose Tico that I've had up forever, and just look at the picture that they chose of Kelly Marie Tran to market this particular toy. Now, the toy doesn't look bad. It's very detailed. It's a detailed looking face for Rose here. She has a cool looking gun. This is not a bad action figure at all. It actually looks like a pretty decent one. But if we compare it to the picture of Leia Organa, and also a good action figure, you can probably see some immediate differences in the face. It's like they chose to make this character Rose, both in the movie and especially in this marketing material. They chose to make her look less pretty, as unpretty, if you will. I don't want to say ugly, because they tried to make her look very plain. They gave her kind of this frumpy haircut in the movie. This picture of her is in a really unflattering angle for her face. And if I compare it to a regular headshot from the movie, she's much more attractive with some softer, general forward lighting with less harsh backfill. We have this backfill, or this, what we call this is fill lighting, kind of really brighter than the head-on lighting, or just as bright, kind of behind her. And this might have been done in Photoshop with with like a color dodge inner shadow or something like that is probably how I would create this effect. And I do this on like my cover models when I want them to look really harsh and gritty. You can do some of this effect. So it's like they made her look extra gritty, crank the levels up so there's really high contrast between the shadows, put a lot of shadows on her face, and it doesn't end up making her look really feminine and attractive. But we see regular pictures of her and she looks very feminine, or we can even look at her headshots from IMDb and you realize that this idea that Kelly Marie Tran was cast because she's ugly, she didn't have to look as sort of plain as they made her look in the movie. And certainly not as bad as they made her look on this marketing material. So they chose this picture for whatever reason. I don't think this is a picture that would appeal a lot to boys because boys understand what's attractive. But at the same time, they photoshopped all of Leia's wrinkles out. They photoshopped her to look more like younger Carrie Fisher and to just look better in general. Notice this harsh lighting it's still there, but it's a more it's a more straight on look of her face, which reduces the amount of shadows. The shadows are much softer around the this side of her face, so she doesn't look nearly as like old. They made her look older than she actually is, which is a weird choice. But it's not that weird a choice when you consider that it's Bolshevik marketing. It's an attempt to create something that you think people ought to want, and you want people. It's like this is something that you get a lot from sort of the third wave feminists, which is wanting Barbies to look more like average women and things like that. Basically trying to make Barbie less attractive because they want girls to have a more realistic view of this or that and the other. And then you produce that product and no one buys it. It's because people like to look at things that are attractive, and there's a difference between fantasy and reality. Star Wars is about fantasy. It's not about having things that are super realistic or represent our culture now. Also, if we live in a galaxy far away, I presume that there would be at least very cheap plastic surgery to make us all look beautiful. Just a thought. Thanks, guys, so much for listening to my little diatribe on this. Other people have been talking about this on other channels. So if you find some other people that have talked about the toys, please let me know down below. I think World Class Bullshitters has done a little bit of content on it as well, but I wanted to give my 2 cents. And those are the 3 kinds of marketing flaws that I think they are kind of falling into. Give me your thoughts down below, and I will see you guys next time.